The night sky had always been a source of wonder for humans. Stars flickered like distant lanterns. Planets moved silently in their orbits, and comets left trails that seemed to mark time itself. For generations, people had looked up with curiosity, wondering if anyone else in the universe was watching them too. For the scientists at the International Space Observation Center, the night of the unusual signal began like any other. Telescopes scanned the familiar constellations, satellites recorded routine solar activity, and computers processed the endless flow of cosmic data. But then something strange happened. It started as a small blip, barely noticeable on the monitors. At first, the team assumed it was a technical glitch. After all, instruments often misread cosmic radiation, and satellites sometimes sent corrupted signals. But when the same anomaly appeared repeatedly, coming from the region near Jupiter, the lead scientist grew uneasy. The energy burst was precise, regular, and unlike anything they had ever seen. It wasn't a meteor nor a solar flare. It seemed deliberate. As hours passed, more observatories around the world picked up the signal. From Chile to Japan, from space telescopes orbiting Earth to deep space listening posts far from the planet, the same strange pattern appeared. It was unmistakable. Someone or something was sending a message, and it was aimed directly at the solar system. Panic did not spread immediately. The news traveled slowly, first among scientists, then through government channels, and finally into public awareness. But a quiet fear began to settle. Humans, for all their achievements, had never faced anything like this. Meanwhile, far beyond Earth, the Galactic Council observed the event with mounting concern. The Council was an assembly of ancient civilizations, species so old they had watched stars form and die. They rarely interfered with developing worlds. Earth was classified as a young civilization, still learning to navigate its own conflicts. And yet, the signal caught their attention. In the observation halls of the Council, representatives of countless species debated what they were seeing. Some were reptilian, their scales glinting under the dim council lights. Others were energy beings, flickers of light and color that shifted with emotion. A few resembled humans, though their features were sharper, more refined, and their eyes held centuries of knowledge. The consensus was unsettling. The energy pulse was a weapon. Its source was unknown, but its pattern suggested attack. The Council had never seen such precision before. Rules governed the Council. They were sworn to observe, not interfere, unless a threat endangered multiple worlds. Earth had never posed such a threat, and its destruction alone did not meet the criteria for direct action. Still, unease spread. Some members argued that if the signal reached Earth, the consequences would ripple through the galaxy. Even planets untouched by the pulse could experience catastrophic gravitational effects. The Council could only watch, bound by ancient law, as the humans unknowingly faced a threat beyond their understanding. Back on Earth, the signal's effects became harder to ignore. Satellites malfunctioned, cutting off communications in scattered regions. The auroras that normally danced near the poles now appeared unexpectedly across the skies, glowing in strange colors, spreading further south and north than ever before. At first, people thought it was a rare natural phenomenon, a miracle of science or nature. Children gazed in awe while adults took photos and posted them online. But scientists quickly realized it was more than a visual spectacle. The atmosphere itself seemed to respond to the energy pulses, shifting in ways no one could explain. A small team of researchers in Chile worked tirelessly, poring over data and cross-referencing every known cosmic event. They discovered that the pulses were not random. They followed a pattern like a signature or a code. The energy appeared to focus on Earth itself, as if the planet had been singled out. The implications were terrifying. The team debated whether to alert the public, fearing mass panic. Yet the truth could not stay hidden for long. The pulses were growing stronger, reaching deeper into the planet's magnetic field. And something unprecedented was happening. Night turned to morning, and news of the phenomenon spread worldwide. Governments scrambled to understand it, but most were unprepared. Communication networks struggled under sudden interference. Military satellites detected the energy bursts, yet no weapons could counteract them. Panic began to rise as experts issued warnings. The pulses were not just signals, they were precursors to an attack. Humanity, for the first time, faced a threat that could not be reasoned with, bargained with, or fought using conventional technology. In the midst of growing fear, people turned to each other. Communities gathered to watch the skies, sharing stories of what they had seen. In small towns and bustling cities alike, humans spoke in hushed tones, their voices full of both fear and awe. Some wondered if these pulses were a message, a test, or the start of something far worse. Others simply prayed for survival, hoping that Earth could withstand what was coming. The scientists in Chile worked day and night, guided by intuition as much as by data. They noticed patterns that hinted at intelligence behind the pulses. The repetition was too precise to be natural. The bursts seemed to carry information, though it remained indecipherable. Slowly, a terrifying realization took hold. Whatever was sending these signals, it had noticed humanity. The world was no longer alone, and it had been observed for a long time without knowing it. Far above, in the vast reaches of space, the Galactic Council continued to watch. Some members argued passionately for intervention. Could humanity survive an attack of this magnitude? Were the humans ready to face the unknown? Others reminded the Council of the law. To act now would violate centuries of sacred rules. The debate raged, but time was already slipping away. The energy bursts grew stronger, traveling faster, edging closer to Earth's orbit with every passing hour. In cities across the globe, humans experienced strange phenomena. Lights flickered unexpectedly, compasses spun wildly, and animals reacted with confusion and fear. It was as if the planet itself sensed danger. Scientists speculated that the magnetic field was being influenced by something outside the solar system, something far beyond human understanding. People could not see the attackers, yet the effects were undeniable. The fear of the invisible enemy spread silently, affecting every corner of life. Despite the chaos, moments of courage emerged. Communities came together, offering support to those in panic. Families shared information about safe areas. Scientists shared research online as much as the network allowed, and strangers helped each other navigate the uncertainty. Humanity's resilience began to shine even in the face of a threat no one fully understood. It was a reminder, even as the skies glowed with unnatural light, that humans were capable of unity, courage, and hope. Back in the observation centers, the Chilean team made a breakthrough. They detected a subtle rhythm in the pulses, like the heartbeat of a machine. The pattern suggested deliberate targeting and coordination. It was not random chaos. Someone or something was preparing for a strike. The implications were chilling. Humanity had no defenses capable of handling what might be coming. And yet, the same data hinted at possibilities, clues that, if understood, might allow them to survive. The night grew darker, and the stars seemed dimmer. Yet the humans on Earth did not give in to despair. Across continents, people watched the sky, hoping for guidance, for a sign that they were not powerless. They felt a connection to each other, fragile but undeniable. The signal had awakened something in them, not just fear but determination. Even as unknown forces prepared to strike, humanity began to show that it would not bow easily, that it would fight for its place among the stars, even if it did not yet know how, and far beyond, the Galactic Council could only watch. They recorded every event, debated every possibility, but they did not interfere. For now, the humans were alone. The pulses continued to strike, and the question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Could Earth survive the attack? Could humanity rise in the face of an enemy it could not see? And somewhere in the void, the attackers watched, unaware that the planet they thought weak might hold a strength they had never expected. The morning after the first unusual pulses, the world woke to confusion. Phones didn't work properly. Computers froze. Television signals were patchy or completely gone. Even the internet was struggling, with websites loading slowly or not at all. People didn't know what to make of it. Was it a massive solar storm? Some kind of technical failure? Or was it something else entirely? Scientists who had stayed up all night watched the skies with tense anticipation. They knew that the bursts were not natural. The energy waves targeted Earth in a way that no sun flare or asteroid could. Governments were contacted immediately, but their response was slow and chaotic. Some officials downplayed the events, calling it an anomaly. Others warned people to be ready for anything. Panic began quietly, like a low hum under the surface of cities. On the streets, life was changing fast. Airplanes delayed flights because communication with airports was unreliable. Trains slowed down as signaling systems failed. In towns far from the big cities, People gathered outside to look at the sky, sharing stories about the strange lights they saw. The auroras, now spreading across unusual parts of the globe, glowed in colors people had never seen. Greens, pinks, and blues twisted together in swirls that seemed almost alive. Children pointed and laughed while adults stared in disbelief. Nobody understood why it was happening, but there was an unspoken fear in the air. Inside a research facility in the southern hemisphere, a small group of scientists worked tirelessly. They compared data from different satellites and observatories around the world. Each team member had stayed awake for hours, their eyes red from fatigue. Finally, one of them spoke, voice trembling. "It's targeting us. Not just the solar system, it's Earth." The room went silent. The idea that someone, or something, was intentionally aiming at their planet was hard to process. They had studied the universe for years, yet never faced anything remotely like this. The scientists quickly realized that public awareness was a double-edged sword. If people panicked, chaos would spread faster than the energy pulses. Yet hiding the truth seemed cruel. Slowly, carefully, they began reaching out to trusted contacts in other observatories, sharing what they had learned. The energy pulses followed a pattern, almost like a signal or a message, but they couldn't decode it. They weren't sure if the pulses were the beginning of an attack or just a warning. Meanwhile, ordinary humans began to experience strange physical effects. Some felt a vibration deep in their bones, almost like the planet itself was humming. Birds flew erratically, confused by the sudden changes in the magnetic field. Animals in zoos became agitated. Even the ocean tides seemed slightly off, higher or lower than predicted. People began to notice that these changes were happening faster in some areas than others. The Earth was reacting to the pulses, though no one could explain how or why. Amid the growing confusion, news networks tried to keep people informed, but their reach was limited. Satellites were failing, signals cutting out in bursts. Governments issued emergency alerts on the radio, urging calm and advising people to stay indoors. But in towns without radio signals or internet access, word spread by word of mouth. Communities began to organize themselves. People shared food, checked on neighbors, and made plans for safety. Fear was present, but so was determination. Humans were beginning to show resilience even in the face of a threat they did not yet understand. In the scientific labs, the breakthrough came unexpectedly. A young researcher noticed that the pulses were not just hitting Earth randomly, they were scanning the planet. Each burst seemed to focus on different regions in a sequence. It was as if someone was mapping Earth, learning its geography, its weaknesses. The discovery was chilling. The pulses were not harmless, they were preparation for something larger. Despite the fear, there were moments of hope. A group of engineers discovered that some satellites, though damaged, could still pick up signals from the energy bursts. By carefully analyzing the reflections, they began to predict where the next pulses would strike. It wasn't a defense, not yet, but it was a start. Humanity had a small chance to respond, even if the attackers were far more advanced. Meanwhile, across the globe, people reacted differently. Some refused to leave their homes, terrified of what might come from the sky. Others ventured out to witness the phenomena, unable to resist the beauty and the fear intertwined in the glowing auroras. Communities gathered in schools, stadiums, and parks, sharing stories of what they had seen. Children asked questions adults could not answer. Some people prayed, while others searched for a scientific explanation. Everywhere, conversations were dominated by a single thought. Earth was being watched, and it might be in danger. In cities, authorities struggled to maintain order. Power grids began to fail in some regions, leaving millions without electricity. Hospitals relied on backup generators. Transportation systems slowed. Panic shopping emptied stores of essentials. And yet, in small acts of kindness, humans showed their strength. Strangers helped each other carry groceries. Neighbors shared blankets and food, and volunteers organized emergency shelters. Even in fear, humanity did not break. As the pulses continued, the scientists noticed something extraordinary. The Earth itself seemed to respond. Magnetic fluctuations increased, creating a faint shield that partially blocked the energy bursts. It was subtle, barely measurable, but it was there. The planet was not helpless. It was almost as if the Earth itself was aware of the danger. The thought was both thrilling and frightening. Humans had never witnessed a planetary defense before. What did this mean for their survival? Could Earth's response actually protect them? Meanwhile, news of the unusual phenomenon reached astronauts aboard the International Space Station. They looked down on Earth in awe and fear. From orbit, the auroras glowed brightly, painting the planet in swirling colors. They saw storm clouds shifting strangely and lightning patterns that seemed unnaturally precise. Though the astronauts were far above the immediate danger, they felt the tension and uncertainty that gripped the people below. Scientists shared what little they knew with world leaders. Urgent meetings were called, though communication was difficult. Some leaders refused to believe the evidence, thinking it exaggerated. Others took immediate action, ordering emergency measures. Military organizations tried to coordinate, but conventional weapons were useless against an invisible, distant threat. People began to understand that survival would not depend on armies, but on understanding, intelligence, and cooperation. In the cities, life adjusted to the new reality. Schools held lessons about emergency preparedness. Families stayed together. Communities organized to monitor the skies and report unusual activity. A sense of unity began to spread. Fear was still present, but it was tempered by cooperation and determination. Humans were beginning to face the unknown together, learning that resilience came not from isolation but from connection. At night, the auroras continued to paint the sky. Families watched from their windows, children pointing at the swirling lights. Adults whispered questions to each other, wondering what was coming next. The scientists worked tirelessly, tracing the pulses, analyzing patterns, and seeking a way to understand the attackers. They did not have answers yet, but they had hope, and hope could be powerful. Some ordinary humans also made small discoveries. A young amateur astronomer noticed that reflective surfaces on rooftops seemed to influence the pulses in subtle ways. A fisherman observed that the ocean responded differently in various locations. Communities shared these observations, combining them with scientific research. Slowly, a picture began to emerge, a fragile understanding of what humanity faced. Despite the fear and uncertainty, moments of courage and ingenuity shone brightly. People found ways to communicate despite failing networks. Communities shared knowledge, food, and shelter. Scientists and civilians alike collaborated in ways never seen before. Humanity's response, though small and imperfect, began to show the potential for survival. The planet was reacting. The people were learning, and far beyond in the silent reaches of space, unknown watchers observed Earth. They saw the resilience, the ingenuity, and the determination of humans. The signals had not gone unnoticed, and the response of the planet itself had not gone unnoticed either. Earth was not as vulnerable as the attackers might have believed. Something was stirring, something unexpected. Humans, for all their limitations, had begun to prove that they were capable of more than anyone could have imagined. As night fell again, the world waited. The pulses continued, but humans did not cower. They adapted, observed, and prepared. The auroras lit the skies, a reminder that even in fear, beauty persisted. The planet hummed faintly, responding to the attacks in a way no one fully understood. And in homes, schools, and labs, humans whispered a quiet promise: they would survive. They would endure. And they would fight, using every ounce of intelligence, courage, and ingenuity they possessed. For the first time, humanity understood that the universe was not silent. It was alive, and they were part of it. And though the threat still loomed, the human spirit was awakening. The energy pulses had not broken them. If anything, they had begun to awaken the strength that had always been within. As the unusual energy pulses continued to strike Earth, the humans were beginning to understand that these were not random events. They were deliberate, targeted, and frighteningly precise. Scientists around the world were working day and night, trying to decode the patterns, but the task seemed impossible. Each day brought new data, new anomalies, and a growing sense of urgency. The pulses were not just affecting technology, they were affecting life itself, subtly altering weather, magnetic fields, and even the behavior of animals. Meanwhile, far above, in a massive city floating near a dying star, the Galactic Council convened. The council was a place of quiet tension, where species older than entire solar systems observed the unfolding events. Representatives of countless worlds debated what they were seeing. Some were insect-like, with delicate wings and compound eyes that flickered with intelligence. Others were creatures of pure energy, their forms shifting and changing with every word spoken. A few resembled humans, though their features were sharper, and their eyes held knowledge of millennia. The debate was heated. Some council members argued that Earth's destruction might be inevitable, that it was a small planet in the grand scheme of the universe. They said that intervening would violate the sacred laws of observation, rules older than many stars. But others disagreed. They warned that the attacks could destabilize nearby systems, that failing to act might allow the same threat to spread. "You cannot interfere," one of the oldest council members said. Its voice was slow and resonant, vibrating in the halls like low thunder. "Our laws are clear. Earth is not ready. Any direct intervention could destroy more than this planet alone." Another voice, sharp and urgent, cut in. "And yet if we do nothing, these humans will perish. We watch, we wait, and they suffer without knowing why. Even a developing species deserves a chance to survive when faced with an enemy beyond their comprehension." The council was torn. Some members suggested secret intervention, sending aid without openly violating the law. Others argued that such interference could be catastrophic if discovered by the attackers. Arguments continued for hours, and yet the council could do nothing immediate. For now, Earth remained in the balance, alone against the unknown. Back on Earth, the scientists' work intensified. They began sharing data internationally, coordinating across time zones despite failing communication networks. Every piece of information mattered. Every observation, every small anomaly could be the key to survival. As they studied the pulses, they noticed that the bursts seemed to have a scanning pattern, moving across regions in precise sequences. It was as if someone or something was learning the planet, mapping it for a purpose that humans could not yet grasp. Ordinary people also began to notice changes. Farmers reported that animals acted strangely, avoiding areas where the pulses were strongest. Fishermen saw tides behaving unpredictably, and pilots reported unusual magnetic interference affecting their instruments. In cities, people noticed faint vibrations beneath their feet, electrical devices flickering in unison, and strange colors in the sky. It was becoming impossible to ignore that something extraordinary was happening, something that was beyond human control. Amid the chaos, humans began to adapt. Communities organized themselves, sharing information and resources. In small towns, people built makeshift observatories, using whatever tools they could find to track the pulses. Schools held lessons about emergency preparedness, and neighbors checked on one another, making sure that vulnerable people had food, water, and shelter. Even in fear, humans found ways to help each other survive. In one laboratory, a team of young researchers made a discovery that changed everything. They realized that the pulses were interacting with Earth's magnetic field in a way that could potentially be harnessed. The planet itself seemed to respond, creating faint protective fluctuations that partially absorbed the energy. It was subtle, not enough to stop the pulses entirely, but it was proof that Earth was not defenseless. The researchers shared their findings with other teams around the globe, and suddenly, humanity had a glimmer of hope. This new knowledge inspired ordinary people as well. Communities began experimenting, using reflective surfaces, magnetic tools, and simple technology to see if they could influence the pulses. They did not fully understand what they were doing, but small successes encouraged them. Radios picked up signals when conditions were right. Light reflected from buildings seemed to influence the patterns of the auroras. Though chaotic, these experiments marked the first time humans were actively responding rather than just reacting. Meanwhile, governments struggled to maintain order. Power grids failed in some areas, leaving millions without electricity. Hospitals relied on backup generators, and emergency services were stretched to their limits. Yet even amidst these failures, human resilience shone. Volunteers coordinated shelters, distributed food, and offered guidance to those in need. People began to see that survival depended not on weapons or armies, but on cooperation, intelligence, and adaptation. Astronauts aboard orbiting stations watched Earth with growing concern. From space, the auroras looked like rivers of light, shifting and pulsing across continents. Storms moved unpredictably, and the planet itself seemed alive in a way that defied explanation. Though the astronauts were removed from the immediate danger, they felt a sense of connection to the people below. Humanity's struggle was visible even from orbit, and it was clear that the planet's response to the pulses was extraordinary. The attacks, however, were relentless. Every day brought new pulses, stronger and more precise than before. Satellites continued to fail, and communication networks remained unreliable. Yet humans refused to give in. Scientists worked around the clock, analyzing the pulses, sharing findings, and building makeshift defenses where possible. Ordinary citizens continued to adapt, creating early warning systems, observing the sky, and finding ways to help their communities. It became clear that the energy bursts were not random destruction. They were testing, probing, and learning. Each strike gathered data, assessing the planet's defenses, human behavior, and even responses from natural systems. The humans were being studied in real time by an enemy they could not see. And yet humanity's response was growing more sophisticated with every passing day. Even as fear spread, so did creativity. Engineers built simple devices to test the interactions with the pulses. Farmers used metal surfaces to observe reflections. Fishermen noted changes in tides. Children and adults alike contributed observations. Slowly, a network of knowledge was forming, a patchwork of science, intuition, and human ingenuity. The Council in space watched with both awe and concern. Some members began to recognize that Earth was responding in ways no one had predicted. The magnetic fluctuations, the faint planetary shields, and the coordinated human response were all signs of an unexpected resilience. The humans were adapting, learning, and cooperating at a rate that suggested they might survive after all. This realization divided the Council further. Some argued that intervention was still forbidden. Others admitted that Earth's unexpected response might require reassessment of their laws. Could a developing species really produce a defense that no ancient civilization had anticipated? Could humanity survive against an enemy even the Council feared? These questions lingered unanswered as the pulses continued to strike. Back on Earth, ordinary life continued alongside extraordinary danger. People began to notice small victories. A city shielded by a combination of metal reflectors and reinforced buildings experienced less disruption. Communities using early warning signals were able to protect power grids and communication hubs. Scientists shared findings with anyone who could use them, spreading knowledge faster than the attackers could adapt. Each small success built confidence and hope, and still the pulses did not stop. Each one tested the limits of human endurance and ingenuity. Each one challenged humans to adapt, think, and cooperate. But with every challenge, they grew stronger. Communities became networks of observation and protection. Scientists worked with civilians. Engineers, students, and ordinary people collaborated to understand and respond to the unprecedented threat. For the first time, humans felt a real sense of purpose in the face of cosmic danger. Fear was still present, but it was balanced by courage, ingenuity, and determination. Humanity was learning that survival depended not just on technology, but on cooperation, resilience, and the willingness to act even when the odds seemed impossible. By the end of the part, humans had started to adapt to the new reality. They had discovered that the planet itself could protect them in small ways. They had begun to build knowledge networks, sharing observations, and experimenting with ways to influence the pulses. And perhaps most importantly, they had realized that even a small developing species could rise to meet a challenge no one had ever faced before. The energy pulses continued, but humanity was no longer helpless. They were learning, observing, and responding. They had started to fight in their own way, not with weapons, but with intelligence, courage, and unity. The attackers could see the changes in real time. Earth was no longer passive. Humans were awake, and they were beginning to show the strength that had always been within them. And far beyond, the Galactic Council watched in silence. The day of the first major impact arrived quietly without warning. From space, Earth looked peaceful. Clouds drifted slowly, oceans shimmered under the sun, and people went about their routines unaware of the storm about to hit. Scientists had been monitoring the energy pulses for weeks, trying to understand the patterns, but nothing could fully prepare them for what was coming. In cities around the world, life carried on, though unease had settled into the daily rhythm. Schools were still open, though students whispered about the strange lights in the sky. Office workers glanced nervously at the news, hoping for guidance. Governments continued to issue instructions, but much of it was guesswork. People had grown accustomed to disruptions, power flickers, radio static, strange auroras, but the unknown nature of the threat made everyone anxious. Then it began. The first wave of energy pulses struck Earth's upper atmosphere. At first it was subtle, a faint glow stretching across the horizon like the sun reflecting off distant clouds. But the glow intensified quickly, turning into brilliant streaks of color that danced across the sky. People ran outside to watch, mesmerized and terrified at the same time. The auroras were unlike anything ever recorded, blinding, swirling with colors that no one could name, spreading across continents. Satellites in orbit detected the impact immediately. Communications faltered. Military systems warned of electromagnetic interference. Planes in the sky struggled with instruments failing. Cities that relied on electricity saw lights flicker and die. Emergency response teams rushed to maintain order, but they were overwhelmed. The pulses struck with a precision that no natural event could replicate. It was clear now. Earth was under attack. In the labs, scientists monitored every change. Instruments measured the pulse's energy, and models predicted their path. Yet despite all calculations, something extraordinary happened. Earth itself responded. The magnetic field shifted, creating an energy buffer that absorbed part of the impact. Clouds swirled, storms intensified, and lightning danced in unusual patterns. It was as though the planet was waking up, defending itself in ways humans could not fully comprehend. People on the ground felt the difference. The first strikes caused panic, but the planet's response protected many regions from the worst effects. Power grids survived in some cities, communication lines partially held, and the atmosphere absorbed much of the energy. Scientists were amazed. They had theorized that the pulses would devastate the planet, yet Earth's natural defenses had stabilized the impact. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to give humanity a fighting chance. Meanwhile, ordinary humans acted instinctively. Communities that had prepared for disruptions quickly adapted. People guided others to safer locations, shared resources, and kept watch on unusual atmospheric changes. In cities where lights flickered, volunteers coordinated traffic manually. Farmers guided livestock away from danger zones. Ordinary humans without weapons or advanced technology began to participate in the defense of their planet, simply by observing, sharing, and responding. The pulses did not stop. They came in waves, testing the planet's defenses and human response. Some areas experienced severe storms, buildings shook from electromagnetic surges, and minor earthquakes rattled towns. But in each case, humans found ways to adapt. Communities coordinated, shelters were reinforced, and local observation teams predicted where the next pulse would strike. Scientists updated their models, combining the planet's natural defenses with human ingenuity. From orbit, astronauts could see the extraordinary display. The auroras stretched from pole to pole, glowing in bright blues, greens, and purples. Storms swirled in unprecedented formations. Lightning struck in patterns that mirrored the pulses in the upper atmosphere. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. They communicated what they observed to scientists below, though even their reports could only partially describe the complexity of what was happening. As the attacks continued, humans began to notice patterns. Some realized that reflective surfaces, metallic objects, and reinforced structures could influence the energy pulses, reducing their intensity. Engineers built simple devices to interact with the pulses, experimenting with magnetic fields and conductive materials. Schools, labs, and communities collaborated. Even children contributed, observing phenomena and sharing insights. Humanity was learning, reacting, and adapting faster than anyone expected. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council watched in silent awe. Ancient beings who had observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations were startled by what they saw. The planet's response was unlike anything recorded before. Magnetic fluctuations, atmospheric shifts, and the coordinated human efforts formed a defense that no one had anticipated. Some council members argued that Earth might survive, while others warned that the attackers would adapt quickly. The debate was heated, but no one interfered. The humans were facing the danger alone. On Earth, ordinary citizens continued to play a critical role. Neighborhoods organized observation points. Farmers guided livestock away from dangerous zones. Fishermen adjusted their routes according to unusual tidal changes. Even simple actions like moving to higher ground or covering electrical systems contributed to survival. The planet's natural defenses worked in tandem with human observation, forming a network of protection that was both instinctive and scientific. In the labs, scientists marveled at how Earth responded. Energy readings showed that the pulses were partially neutralized by fluctuations in the magnetic field. The storms, lightning, and auroras were more than natural reactions. They were part of a planetary shield. For the first time, humans realized they were not just passive observers. They were participants in the planet's defense. Every action, every observation, and every effort to adapt made a difference. Despite the successes, the pulses remained dangerous. Entire regions experienced disruptions. Electrical systems were damaged. Communications failed intermittently. Weather patterns shifted violently. Cities were evacuated and millions sought shelter. Yet even in the face of destruction, humans refused to surrender. Communities organized food distribution, coordinated emergency shelters, and shared information. Ordinary people without military power became essential in the survival of their world. One remarkable aspect of the defense was how humans learned from each pulse. Each strike taught them something new. Scientists noticed that certain reflective surfaces reduced energy absorption. Communities realized that higher ground and insulated buildings offered protection. Children observed unusual patterns in the auroras and shared insights with adults. Slowly, a system of observation and adaptation emerged, a network of human intelligence that worked alongside the planet itself. Even as chaos unfolded, moments of courage and ingenuity shone brightly. Firefighters navigated blackout streets to rescue trapped families. Volunteers delivered water and supplies to shelters. Engineers repaired critical systems using improvisation and teamwork. Across the globe, humans acted instinctively, combining knowledge, creativity, and courage to survive. The pulses could test them, but humans proved capable of responding. Astronauts reported back that Earth looked alive from space. Energy waves, auroras, and storms formed intricate patterns, like a living organism defending itself. Humans were part of that organism, acting as observers, responders, and innovators. The collaboration between human effort and planetary response was extraordinary. It was a reminder that even small developing species could influence forces far beyond their comprehension. As the day turned to night, the pulses gradually subsided. The planet's shield had absorbed much of the energy, and humans had adapted to survive the waves. Cities were damaged but not destroyed. Communities had learned to coordinate. Scientists had learned more about the pulses than ever before. Humanity had survived the first major strike and in doing so had begun to prove that it could endure. And far beyond, in the silence of the stars, the attackers observed with surprise. They had expected easy conquest. They had not anticipated the planet's defense, nor the humans' quick adaptation and ingenuity. Earth had survived the first major strike, and in the process, humans had begun to awaken their potential. They had shown that even against an enemy far more advanced, the combination of intelligence, observation, and courage could make a difference. The Galactic Council watched silently, recording every event. Some members whispered that Earth's survival was unexpected. Others warned that the attackers would not relent. The debate continued, but all agreed on one thing. Humans had proven themselves resilient, adaptive, and capable of more than anyone had predicted. The planet itself had responded to protect them, and humanity had risen to meet the challenge. As night fell, the people of Earth looked to the sky. The auroras glowed faintly, a reminder of the planet's defense. Storms settled in some regions, and the first steps of recovery began. Communities helped each other rebuild, sharing food, water, and shelter. Scientists analyzed the data, looking for ways to improve understanding and protection. Humanity had faced the first test and survived. Even in the aftermath, humans continued to learn. They realized that survival depended not just on technology, but on cooperation, observation, and courage. They had discovered that the planet itself could act as a defense and that, after the first major strike, humanity began to realize that survival depended on more than just endurance. The planet had defended itself partially, but the energy pulses continued to come, testing the planet and its inhabitants with relentless precision. Humans could no longer be passive observers. They had to act. Every observation, every experiment, and every small success now carried enormous weight. Communities around the world had begun to organize. Neighborhood watch groups doubled as observation teams, recording unusual phenomena in the skies. Farmers who had once relied on routine now adjusted their schedules based on electromagnetic changes. Even children contributed, noting patterns in the auroras and passing observations to adults. Every piece of information became part of a growing network of knowledge. Scientists, engineers, and volunteers worked together like never before. Temporary labs sprang up in schools, community centers, and even private homes. Instruments were improvised, satellites analyzed, and early warning systems developed using whatever technology remained functional. Humans discovered that by combining planetary fluctuations with simple reflective or conductive materials, they could partially influence the pulses. It was not a complete solution, but it gave them hope, and hope was powerful. Emergency management teams coordinated globally. Governments and civilian groups shared resources, food, and shelter information. Cities that had been hit hardest now implemented rapid adaptation strategies. Streets were cleared for emergency vehicles. Schools and stadiums were transformed into shelters. Communities took care of the vulnerable, elderly, sick, and children, ensuring that no one was left behind. As humans adapted, they began to notice another extraordinary fact. The pulses themselves seemed to react. Energy waves that once caused widespread disruption now met resistance. Metallic surfaces, insulated structures, and carefully positioned devices altered the energy flow slightly, creating localized reductions in intensity. Scientists studied the changes, amazed that their interventions could influence something they once believed unstoppable. In one rural town, volunteers had lined the rooftops with simple reflective panels, a strategy suggested by amateur scientists experimenting with light and magnetic energy. When the next pulse arrived, it was weaker in that area. People realized that even simple human ingenuity could protect lives and property. Word spread quickly and other towns adopted similar measures. A network of observation and response slowly began to emerge, connecting humans in a way that the attackers could not have anticipated. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council continued to watch. Ancient beings who had observed countless civilizations rise and fall were beginning to recognize a new pattern. The humans were not just surviving, they were adapting rapidly. Their intelligence, creativity, and cooperation were influencing the outcome of the attacks in real time. Some council members expressed awe. Others expressed concern that the attackers would escalate their strikes. One thing was clear: the humans' survival and ingenuity had changed expectations. On Earth, ordinary citizens continued to play an essential role. Fishermen tracked changes in the tides, helping communities predict how pulses might affect coastal regions. Farmers observed animals' reactions to the pulses, noting patterns that could indicate safer areas. Students, guided by their teachers, made careful observations of auroras, magnetic field fluctuations, and lightning patterns. Each observation, however small, contributed to humanity's collective understanding. Scientists began to notice another phenomenon. The planet's magnetic field was not only reacting passively, it appeared to strengthen in areas where human activity concentrated. The more humans observed and interacted with their environment intelligently, the more the planet seemed to reinforce its defenses. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the pattern was undeniable. Humanity was no longer just defending itself, it was actively shaping the planet's response. Engineers developed makeshift devices designed to enhance these interactions. Simple magnetic amplifiers, reflective grids, and energy-conducting panels were placed strategically across the globe. Communities tested different configurations, documenting results meticulously. Slowly, humans were learning not only to survive but to influence the very forces attacking them. The enemy could not anticipate these unpredictable responses, giving humans a strategic advantage, however small it was. As these defenses took shape, the pulses began to show signs of adjustment. The energy waves arrived at slightly different angles, shifted their frequency, and concentrated on regions that had not yet adapted. It became clear to scientists that the attackers were observing, learning, and trying to counter human strategies. A silent battle of intelligence had begun. Humans could not see their enemy, but they could observe the effects and respond. Ordinary citizens contributed in unexpected ways. Artists, using drones and reflective surfaces, discovered patterns that helped redirect energy bursts. Teachers and students experimented with metallic arrays on school rooftops, which reduced damage in nearby neighborhoods. Communities shared results across networks that survived partially functioning internet and radio systems. Humans were learning to act collectively, combining intuition, observation, and innovation to survive. Meanwhile, space observatories detected unusual signals among the pulses. Scientists initially assumed they were noise, but Careful analysis revealed that some energy waves carried schematics, complex designs far beyond human technology. The origins were unknown, but the design seemed intended to help humanity. Some researchers speculated that a hidden ally within the attacker's systems might be intervening. Others believed it could be a natural cosmic phenomenon interpreting human responses. Regardless of the source, the designs were invaluable. Using these schematics, scientists began constructing rudimentary devices to enhance the planet's natural defenses. Some devices amplified the magnetic field. Others reflected or absorbed energy bursts. It was slow work requiring ingenuity and improvisation, but it was effective. Small towns and cities reported reduced impact during subsequent pulses. Human observation and action were now actively shaping survival. The attackers, though unseen, were clearly adapting. Energy pulses increased in intensity in areas where defenses were strongest. New techniques were required. Humans responded by constantly innovating, improving shields, adjusting reflective grids, and experimenting with energy modulation. Every pulse became a test of human intelligence, creativity, and resilience. And every successful adaptation strengthened morale across the planet. Ordinary life continued amidst the chaos. Children continued to attend makeshift schools. Farmers maintained crops in unpredictable weather. Volunteers coordinated emergency shelters and food distribution. Even in fear, humanity found courage and purpose. People realized that survival depended on unity, observation, and action. Alone, any human might have been powerless, but together, they had begun to form a network capable of resisting the pulses. The Galactic Council watched, noting every development with fascination. Humans were no longer passive. Their ingenuity, cooperation, and responsiveness had created a dynamic system that altered the impact of the attacks. It was unprecedented. Many council members acknowledged that these young humans might survive against odds no one had predicted. The planet itself, responding to human interaction, had become part of the defense. Earth and humanity were working together in ways that seemed almost symbiotic. As days passed, humanity continued to adapt. Communities mapped energy pulse patterns. Scientists refined devices based on observed effects, and ordinary people contributed observations and practical solutions. Humans were no longer just reacting. They were planning, strategizing, and learning from each strike. Each success, however small, built confidence and hope. Humanity was becoming active participants in its own survival. The pulses began to arrive less predictably, but humans had learned to adapt. Every strike was met with preparation, observation, and response. Communities coordinated globally using partially functioning communication networks. Scientists, volunteers, engineers, and ordinary citizens contributed to a growing system of defense. It was imperfect, but it worked. Humanity was learning, surviving, and even thriving under pressure. For the first time, humans began to see themselves differently. They were no longer helpless in the face of an unknown enemy. They were innovators, observers, and participants in a planetary defense system. They had proven that intelligence, cooperation, and resilience could turn the tide even when the odds seemed impossible. The energy pulses had not defeated them. They had awakened something powerful within humanity. And far beyond in the darkness of space, the attackers observed. They had expected easy conquest. Instead, they found a planet alive with resistance, guided by a species that learned faster and adapted better than expected. The humans' actions had altered the patterns of attack, creating uncertainty and frustration among the unseen enemy. Earth had survived, and humanity had begun to rise as more than just a target. By the end of this phase, humans had proven something remarkable. They had learned that survival depended not only on technology but on intelligence, courage, and cooperation. They had discovered that Earth could defend itself in ways previously unimaginable, and that humans could influence that defy. The days had turned into weeks, and humanity had learned to survive. The energy pulses continued, but people had grown stronger, more aware, and more coordinated. The initial panic had transformed into a focused determination. Communities no longer waited for government instructions. They acted, observed, and responded on their own. Humanity had become a living, adaptive network, working in harmony with the planet itself. Scientists were at the center of this effort, but they were no longer alone. Ordinary citizens had become collaborators, sharing observations, conducting experiments, and helping construct simple devices that enhanced the planet's natural defenses. Cities and towns were filled with networks of mirrors, magnetic arrays, and reflective panels designed to alter the paths of the energy pulses. Every household had some role to play. Every citizen was part of the defense. The auroras had become more vivid and frequent, a constant reminder of both danger and resilience. At first, they frightened people. Now they inspired them. Children watched the sky with wonder, while adults coordinated responses and prepared for the next strike. The pulses had become part of daily life, and humans had learned to live with them using intelligence, observation, and creativity to survive. One day, an unexpected breakthrough occurred. Scientists analyzing satellite data noticed that some pulses seemed weaker in certain regions. Further investigation revealed that these areas were where humans had concentrated efforts. Reflective surfaces, reinforced structures, and magnetic amplifiers. The planet's natural defenses, combined with human ingenuity, were creating a measurable protective effect. Humanity realized something extraordinary. They were not just surviving, they were actively shaping their own protection. Excitement spread quickly. Communities began coordinating globally, sharing strategies and results. A pulse that struck one city and caused minor disruption was carefully studied, and the findings were shared worldwide. Engineers and volunteers replicated successful strategies in towns thousands of miles away. Every success, no matter how small, strengthened morale and increased confidence. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council continued to observe. The ancient beings were astonished. They had never seen a species respond so quickly, intelligently, and creatively to such an overwhelming threat. Some council members whispered that humans were proving themselves capable of survival against enemies far more advanced than themselves. Others debated whether this resilience was a sign that intervention might be justified if the pulses escalated. For now, the council remained observers, fascinated and cautious. The attackers, unseen and unknown, were adjusting their approach. Pulses arrived with new patterns, varying in intensity and direction, as though they were testing the humans' evolving defenses. Yet humanity adapted faster than expected. Communities moved reflective panels, recalibrated magnetic amplifiers, and experimented with new configurations. Every pulse became a lesson, and humans learned quickly. They were no longer passive victims. They were participants in a dynamic system, influencing the very attacks that threatened them. Amid the chaos, ordinary people performed acts of courage and ingenuity that went unnoticed on a global scale, but made a profound difference locally. Volunteers braved storms to deliver food and water. Teachers converted schools into observation posts. Farmers guided livestock to safer grounds based on subtle changes in the environment. Even children contributed, observing unusual patterns in the auroras and magnetic fluctuations. Every action, however small, helped humanity adapt and survive. In the scientific community, a significant discovery was made. Some of the energy pulses contained complex sequences, almost like encoded messages. Teams worked tirelessly to decode them, and slowly a pattern emerged. The pulses were not just attacks. They carried information, designs, and schematics that could help humans improve their defenses. Where the origin came from was unclear. Some speculated it was a natural phenomenon responding to the humans' actions. Others wondered if a hidden ally within the attackers' systems was subtly helping. Regardless, humans had a tool they had never anticipated, knowledge embedded within the very attacks themselves. Using these insights, humanity improved its defenses. Magnetic amplifiers were strengthened, reflective arrays were optimized, and communities collaborated more efficiently. Every pulse was met with preparation, observation, and response. Scientists and ordinary citizens alike became part of an unprecedented global experiment, testing, adapting, and refining defenses in real time. Humanity had transformed fear into action, chaos into organization, and threat into opportunity. The attacks escalated, as if the enemy recognized the growing human capability. Pulses became more complex, more precise, and in some areas more intense. Cities that had previously experienced only minor disruption now faced severe challenges. Electrical grids were stressed, communication networks faltered, and storms intensified. Yet humans did not falter. Every failure became a lesson. Every mistake became data. Communities adapted, rebuilt, and strengthened defenses. Humanity had discovered that resilience was not about perfection. It was about learning, improving, and persisting. Even as fear persisted, hope became a constant companion. The knowledge that humans could influence the outcome gave them courage. People who once felt powerless realized that their actions mattered. Children observed patterns in the auroras. Families reinforced structures, and volunteers coordinated emergency systems. Humans were no longer passive targets. They were active participants in their own survival. Astronauts observing from space noticed another remarkable change. The planet itself appeared to respond more dynamically to human efforts. Magnetic fluctuations intensified in areas where communities were actively defending. Storms shifted to avoid regions with high observation activity, and energy pulses were partially absorbed or redirected. It was subtle but undeniable. Earth and humanity were working together, creating a defense system far beyond what anyone had imagined. Across the globe, humans began to anticipate the pulses. Communities developed early warning systems using both scientific and intuitive observations. They coordinated sheltering, reinforced critical infrastructure, and shared real-time data with other towns and cities. Each successful adaptation reduced damage, protected lives, and strengthened morale. Humanity had transformed from a vulnerable species into an intelligent, adaptive network capable of influencing the forces that threatened them. The attackers, still unseen, were faced with an unexpected reality. Humans were learning, adapting, and influencing outcomes. The pulses no longer caused predictable destruction. They met resistance, adaptation, and strategy. For the first time, the attackers encountered a species capable of learning from their attacks and responding intelligently. Every strike was now a test not just of destruction, but of resilience, ingenuity, and coordination. As the weeks continued, a new sense of unity spread across the planet. Borders became less important. People shared knowledge, resources, and strategies. Ordinary citizens, scientists, engineers, and volunteers all contributed to the survival effort. Humans had learned that the difference between life and death depended on cooperation, observation, and action. It was a lesson hard learned, but humanity had embraced it fully. Then, something extraordinary happened. The pulses slowed, weakened, and became less frequent. Scientists hypothesized that the attackers had observed humanity's unexpected adaptability. Every community working together, every reflective surface, every magnetic amplifier, and every observational effort had created a resistance far stronger than anticipated. The planet's own response, combined with human ingenuity, had created a system the attackers could not easily overcome. The Galactic Council observed quietly, awestruck. Humans had transformed from a young, unprepared species into a coordinated, intelligent force capable of influencing cosmic events. The Council debated what this meant for the future. Some members suggested studying humans further, perhaps even supporting them discreetly. Others believed that humans had proven they could survive without interference. The conclusion was unanimous. Humanity's resilience had exceeded all expectations. On Earth, humans celebrated small victories quietly. Power grids were restored in some areas, communities rebuilt structures, and families reunited. Observation teams continued monitoring the skies, knowing that vigilance was still necessary. But the fear that once gripped the planet had diminished. Humans had survived, adapted, and thrived despite an enemy far more advanced. Even the auroras, once frightening, became a symbol of resilience. They glowed brightly across the sky, reflecting the planet's and humanity's combined efforts. Children laughed as they watched the colors shift, while adults shared stories of courage, ingenuity, and survival. The pulses had tested them, but humans had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. The attackers did not vanish completely, but their strikes were no longer decisive. Humanity's intelligence, coordination, and planetary defense had forced them to adapt, reconsider, and retreat strategically. Earth had survived, humanity had survived, and in the process a young species had proven that even against overwhelming odds, courage, intelligence, and unity could triumph. The story of survival became a quiet legend among humans. Communities continued to collaborate, prepare, and innovate. See